And now, here we are. The end of this sort of Sekiro marathon, if you will. We've gone through our favorite zones, discussed the anomalies that are mini-bosses, and now it is time for the main event. Bosses have always been a key highlight in FromSoft's catalog, and the ones in Sekiro are no exception. In fact, the roster in Sekiro is so good that it's probably the most well-rounded of any Soulsborne game. Besides a few exceptions that can be deemed as bad or just meh, most of the bosses in this game are well crafted and pretty good. So choosing how these following 10 should be ordered was extremely painful for me. Some bosses were absolute blasts on the first playthrough, and some weren't so fun. But, to be certain of my feelings, I ran through the game 4 more times, factoring in the first encounter, player experience and skill, as well as how all these factors may be changed or amplified with debuffs such as Demon Bell and Kuro's Charm. Like with any other countdown of mine, however, the most important factor for me will be how fun the boss was, not just on the first run, but also on subsequent playthroughs. Just keep in mind that this is all my personal opinion, and no one else is factored into this. And hey, if you don't see a boss that you like on this list, or alternatively disagree with the placement of something on this list, that's completely fine by me. In fact, I heavily encourage discussions and debates in the comment section below. Just please be civil. So with all that said, ready your blade, focus your stance, and maybe have some divine confetti on standby, for these are my top 10 favorite Sekiro bosses. A good incentive to throw out the player to continue or start their journey is the classic trope of revenge. Somebody wronged or dishonored you? Go kill them and their entire army of mooks or anybody else in your path. Want to know another equally good incentive? Rivalry. Having competition lying there, equal or superior to you when you're around just can't be allowed. And the way you and your opponent clash over the course of the narrative can create some great development. So what happens when you combine both of these aspects? You get Genichiro Ashana. The head honcho of the Ashana clan, Genichiro is a definite highlight of the game, and for good reason. From a narrative perspective, I have no qualms with him whatsoever, and love how the narrative doesn't just show him change throughout, but also Sekiro and the player. From the moment you boot up the game and encounter him, you've had at bare minimum, maybe a few minutes of actual combat with only one mini-boss that was easy enough to kill. So to be face to face with a full-on boss this early, and with Sekiro so soon out of his depression is quite the sudden turn. And as expected, you get your shit kicked in, your left arm severed, and the divine heir gets kidnapped. Well, that sucks! The bugger basically blindsided me in the first half hour of the game! From that moment onward, you're not just on a mission to take back the divine heir, but to claim vengeance upon Genichiro. Whereas before you drew your sword clumsily and with hesitation, barely any experience under your belt. Now you draw it quick, confidently, ready for action. And if you haven't already gotten the hang of the parry system by now, then oh boy, will Genichiro make sure you do, starting now. With a combination of sword swings, stabs, swipes, leaping strikes, flurries, and a multitude of arrows from his bow, Genichiro will surely test you from all distances. And unlike the previous 2 bosses, you don't have all that much room to navigate around if you try to cower it out and run away. In fact, doing so might just screw you over. The key to this battle is to stay close, keep the pressure on him, closing the gap if you're far away, and responding with proper technique when he attacks. If you can nail the timings, then you can make it to a second phase in no time, where in which he calls for some assistance from Zeus and modifies his moveset. And you know it gets serious when from right out of the gate, he comes at you like a bat out of hell. Grabs, a follow-up to his flurry, and his devastating lightning attacks are what you'll be dealing with in this phase. And despite only having 1 pip of health, he can very easily kill you if you fuck up. But if you can figure out the timing of the reversal from the little hint earlier, or just continue doing what you did before efficiently, then you will go down without a hitch. So with all that in mind, why is he this far down? Well, to put it simply, He didn't stand out all that much to me, especially in difficulty. Sounds ludicrous, I know with the lightning he pulls, but if you get the timing down, then it becomes pathetically easy to take a chunk off his vitality and posture. In fact, that's a theme I find for his entire fight. He seems intimidating at first, but if anything, the moment you learn all of his attacks, he actually becomes one of the easiest bosses in the game, and doesn't really have all that much to counter with. He is absolutely a parry test in terms of design, but if you got the hang of parrying before that, then it isn't all that difficult of a test. And it feels like that ease of mind I can get with him is actively hindering the fun I can have. Before any excitement I can feel gets too high, the battle just ends. That's a damn shame. The beginning is perhaps one of the most important, if underrated aspects of the game. Within the first couple of hours, you need to hook the player with the movement, art, combat, and enemies, all the while trying to not turn them away. The first boss is especially important, as it sets a precedent for all bosses afterwards to follow and surpass, creating a gradual escalation. And nothing screams making an impression like... My name is Yobu Masataka Oniwa! As I breathe, you will not pass the castle gate! That. But what an effective and intimidating introduction it is. The entire point up to here, you've been warned about Yobu the Demon, hyping him up through the talk and speculation between the guards. A man so powerful, he single-handedly keeps the gates to Ashana Castle closed. If you want to get in, you will have to take him down, and what an engaging experience it is. This is your first real boss of the game, which combined with the large arena, intimidating presence, hasty mobility, and the fact that you probably haven't fully picked up on parrying yet, carries a lot of pressure with it. Luckily, thanks to your new Shinobi prosthetic and grappling hook, the scales can tip into your favor. Up close, Yobu is an absolute beast, unleashing powerful and wide sweeps, stabs, thrusts, and the very rare but hilarious horse jump. Some of his attacks feature quite a bit of wind-up, so parrying them can be tricky, especially if you haven't utilized the technique. Combine all that with the unique horse rider gimmick and his speed, and you'll have quite the adrenaline rush coursing through you by the time it is all over. Even though he isn't all that difficult, excluding subsequent playthroughs, I love Yobu just for the fun and enjoyment he produces. And you know FromSoft succeeded, when all I'm left with at the end is a feeling of wanting to fight him again. So, remember how just last entry I said how Yobu was the first main boss in the game you fought? Well, that's partially true, because the first boss I fought in the game wasn't him, but rather the elusive Master of Illusions herself. At this point within the game, I had barely gotten the basics of parrying down, more often than not playing Bloodborne within Sekiro and just passing by. But then comes along this chick who tells me no, then proceeds to kick my ass for the next 18 attempts. But I wouldn't have had it any other way, for she was the boss to truly buckle me down and force me to play by Sekiro's rules of deflection and posture. And despite being an old lady, she sure puts up one hell of a fight. Utilizing her multitude of kunai and acrobatic movements, Lady Butterfly dominates the battlefield from a number of distances, covering almost all forms of approach. Kunai as a projectile from the ground, kunai from the air, kicks, dashes, jumps, and flurry combos just to name a few. Hell, some of these movements even try to de-lock your camera, making you lose sight of her in panic, which is an apt word for this fight, especially when the second phase hits. Thought you could just try and deflect everything, huh? Well, how about we throw in some butterfly bullets that inflict chip damage on you, even when parried? And these bullets aren't just thrown out manually, oh no. They happen during her combos, meaning you have to try and find a balance of gain away and lure out the bullets, meanwhile her combo continues. All the while, everything just gets worse with the introduction of her illusion enemies, which present a major hazard in simply being there and trying to fight Lady Butterfly, especially when they are all sacrificed to rain hell upon you. It all comes together perfectly into a hectic showdown, where you are trying to balance numerous factors at the same time, from the ghost, to her bullets, to her combos, and to making sure her posture doesn't heal back if you lay off. And it is from all this that I finally got into the groove, and started truly appreciating Sekiro and its combat system. Thank you, Lady Butterfly. You were the wake-up call I so desperately needed. Trust is a fickle thing. It takes a lot to put your faith into another, to openly expose yourself, sharing with them your heart's desires and secrets, only to have a serrated knife plunge into the heart and shatter it. Betrayal hurts. And the entire time, you are just left asking, why? Why did you change? Why did you do this? Why must you turn your back on us, you monster? You know, that title is honestly misleading, because the Feels blade plunged into my shoulder isn't gentle. It's heavy. You chose to turn your back on Kuro. You chose to obey Owl knowing he lied and manipulated events. You chose to destroy the efforts of everything you have been working towards. So here, suffer! And despite being very much not a warrior, Emma certainly kicked my ass numerous times. This is largely due to the fact that a wide variety of Emma's attacks are unique, and also have a gigantic disparity in delay. She's got rapid fire combo attacks and swift sweeps, positions to hold into for a few seconds to disrupt your rhythm, a very quick walking animation, super armored paralysis, a surprisingly keen sense of knowing when you're healing and bum rushing over, and even the attacks that he does share with other enemies or bosses being altered to throw your memory for a loop. And once again, for being something titled the Gentle Blade, she really isn't when considering she's got some pretty beefy damage to back up her frame, a new grab where she fucking suplexes you to the ground, and even some terrifyingly high chip damage from attacks like the EI Slash. In fact, with debuffs like Demon Bell and Curl Charm on, I found her to be one of the most difficult things to face, mainly due to the massive chip I would take if I fucked up, and knowing this wasn't even close to the end of my struggles. And by the time you finally bring her down with a death blow, I feel nothing, because I'm not supposed to. Whereas before I killed for honor and duty, mercy even. Now I am just killing for sport, fun. I've become a monster. Above all else, this battle puts a keen emphasis on the emotional weight your decision means not just for you, but for everyone else who has supported your endeavors. The shadow of Shura is visible within you, looming ever closer with this one decision towards cruel, stone-hearted loyalty. And with the blood you have spilled thus far in your journey, who knows how all that might turn out? Emma knows that even with training from Ishin, she is not a warrior and barely stands a chance against you, but she still tries anyways to take you down. And throughout the entire battle in the music, a feeling of sorrow and regrets lingers over the situation, especially on Emma's mind. Think about it, in this scenario, to her, because of her, she may have just brought about the birth of a demonic war god who will bring fire and destruction to the land. If she just killed or left you there at the beginning, then none of this would have happened. I'm sorry, Emma, but you're wrong. I'm the one at fault here, not you. Besides being notorious and well known for creating challenges and bosses like we often see, Miyazaki and the team over at FromSoft are also masters of sneaking details so deeply into the experience that they become intertwined with it. Details that manifest within the boss to become a character of their own, or even embody one. The Dancer of the Boreal Valley, for example, from Dark Souls 3, isn't just popular for being a good, challenging boss in the eyes of many, but also in how she almost glides across the arena like a ghost, and the way that graceful movement as a dancer is seen throughout her fight. And if there were ever to be a successor to the dancer, then I feel the Corrupted Monk would be exactly that. The eternal watchdog of the Fountainhead Palace, the Corrupted Monk is a sight to behold. Everything about her exudes an air of grace and precision. Witnessing the way she turns and twists, almost flowing her body and in turn Naginata like water. It is like she's cleaving through mountains and canyons with said water. And those canyons might soon be you if you don't pay attention to this dance and follow along. As shown in my Sekiro stream through highlights, the Corrupted Monk gave me quite the run for my money in the first encounter, being the single highest boss I died to in that entire playthrough. And the main reason as to why is all because of her movement and the delay she carries between each swing. If you're used to the quick, striking bosses like Genichiro, then you'll be thrown for the biggest of loops when you try to parry her strikes, only for the actual hit to come seconds later. To win, you must dance along with her, following the anticipation and parrying only when the blade precisely hits you, then carrying that motion throughout the rest of the fight as you survive through her onslaughts. Much of the same will carry over into the second phase, but the pace will start to pick up for the introduction of her wet nurse move and the change in music, almost like the dance is getting more primordial, like we the dancers are being possessed. And it isn't until the third phase where that statement couldn't be any farther from the truth. The uncanny and creeping wrath is now in full effect, thanks to the appearance of the centipede, with the monk changing out and even modifying her moveset to be quicker and more forceful, like she has fallen to beastly instinct, but still retains its slight trace of refined art with her. The dance is thrown off rhythm, and as you try to find your balance to continue, you are bombarded by her animalistic assault and the terror she produces. It is only when you adapt to those changes that you can finally take the monk down, relieving her of her duty and finishing this immortal dance at long last. If people aren't convinced that FromSoft can create art through these games and their difficulty, then I don't know what will. For the longest time, FromSoft has always struggled when it comes to making compelling spectacle or puzzle bosses. Generally, they have great ideas in mind, but often flawed execution that gimps other aspects of the gameplay and boss. Whether they be one-hit kill wonders, absurdly static and gigantic damage sponges running down a hallway repeatedly, or running around in an entire chamber to chase after one guy, only to get fucked the moment you enter. But at long last, the curse has finally been broken. A boss that can not only wow and intrigue the player, but provide a battle experience unlike any other. And it is simply divine. I honestly don't know what to say. This fight is just breathtaking. No. Calling it a fight doesn't even scratch the surface. It is an experience. From sheer scale alone, you are fighting against something that towers over everything else you have faced thus far. Something that is just mystifying and supernatural. How can you even expect to fight this thing? Short answer, you don't. Taking a page straight out of Avatar: The Last Airbender, in order to win, you must channel the lightning through your body and redirect it before you hit the ground. You don't just get some new random item halfway across the arena and use that. No, you utilize a key mechanic and subsidiary of parrying introduced hours before this point and reinforced through your journey in Fountainhead. All the while, you avoid incoming slashes from the dragon's sword, but if you aren't mindful of, can take a bit off your health and even knock you down to the ground. You repeat this process until the last bit of his health, where he then stands his ground and shows off his desperation move, for lack of a better term. And onslaught of slashes of varying speeds and directions heading your way. All the while, the music crescendos into its climax with a dragon's roar. Then, at long last, you ascend into the sky, chasing after the lightning like Raijin, slamming down on the dragon one last bolt before it falls, finally getting the dragon's tears. Though not extremely difficult for this point in the game, the experience, ambience, and especially music more than make up for it with mind-blowing power. Everything about it just portrays the absolute majesty of this creature before you, fighting atop the clouds as lightning descends, the winds howl as sakura blossoms fall, and as the creature roars in pain, all while an air of serenity is felt. While it may not have as much of an impact on subsequent playthroughs, the feeling this fight creates lasts forever, and can only be described as sheer euphoria. Also, yeah, there's that weird first phase with the multiple dragons. Yeah, that's just weird. I've got nothing interesting to say about it. Next entry! A common theme that pops up within the game is the idea of victory. More specifically, victory no matter what. The Ashana style is defined by just simply winning, nothing more, nothing less. Genichiro at the beginning states that a shinobi would know the difference between honor and victory, and the game largely encourages options and the utilization of tools within your arsenal to gain the upper hand. But even among all this talk of winning no matter what, one instance in particular stands out. Owl, you piece of shit! Nothing feels better than the smell of vengeance, I tell you. And on a scamp like Owl, it is just a 4-course buffet. But something tells me that the food has most likely been tampered with. Because even among all the other bosses in the game and the shit they pull, Owl stands out like a sore thumb with how, well, cheap he is. He is a cheater through and through, a person who psychologically manipulates others into his trap, raises and shepherds Wolf for his own machinations in Arata Estate, and feigns ignorance and emotions to try and assassinate not just you, but Emma as well. And in battle, all that and more is fully shown off in his moveset that is just downright scummy. Like, yeah, sure, Genichiro fucking pulls out the power of Zeus in anime, but I don't see him using shurikens, firecrackers, anti-heal bombs where he repeatedly insists I live up to my namesake and go for the ball. Stop it! The fucking Makiri counter if you get just a little bit greedy with your stabs or spear, and later on in the second phase, smoke bombs, jars of poison, recovering his posture, and even feigning defeat and mercy. He has a straight up dirty fighter throughout, and that's the main reason why I really like this battle. He's so unique compared to every other boss in the game, and while the motto of get close and parry still applies for many of his dangerous combos, there's also a focus of being cautious and taking the battle slow. If you try to rush in and aren't careful about the poison or anti-heal bombs, sometimes both at the same time, then you are going to be in a dangerous situation for quite a while, where one fuck-up could mean half your health gone from one of his swings, all while you can't heal any of that back and are suffering from poison. It is a fight designed at its very core to make the player annoyed, to make them want to rush him down and get it done with, only for them to be immensely punished for their greed. And you know, I really can't appreciate such a well thought out design. You're still a piece of shit though, Owl. Just saying. FromSoft seems to have a weird fascination with picking figures of a not-so-younger generation as the final boss for most of their games. Why is that? A lot of potential reasons, awesome factor being a big one, yes, but I think the main reason why is that they tie into the narratives and give the player a way of looking at the past of that world and closing their chapter, allowing us, the player, to create a new future or ending, so to speak. Gwyn and his prolonging of the Age of Fire that drove him insane and hollow. Gehrman being one of the last old hunters around, wary and depressed about his eternal hell, but always insisting that you be freed instead. Gale being the last living remnant of the past who has lived since forever at the end of the world, fighting you for what little remains and more. And hey, you know what they say. Beware of an old man in a profession where men usually die young. Despite being elderly, sick, and not exactly in his prime, Genichiro Ashana will still step up to the plate to protect Ashana from the looming threat of Shura. And while maybe not as physically strong, he will use every last bit of skill and technique he's learned over his long life to defeat you. Having defined the Ashana style of combat, many similar looking moves will be observed here within his fight, including even the infamous Ichimonji, which may seem lame to some, but on the flip side, he has one thing over everything else in the entire game: the ability to purposefully sidestep your attack and counter, which, let me tell you what, really threw me for the biggest loop when I first went for this battle. Having a safe looking opening of him just walking around being instead a counter for my greed and punishing me for trying to get in an extra hit. Where things get hairy, however, is in the second phase, where he will immediately begin by fanning the flames around the arena, following that up into what might be one of the flashiest sequences in the game. It's intimidating, powerful, and it sure as hell made my jaw drop on the floor. No matter what, that attack will always get me nervous, just trying to look for a safe space to hide into and hopefully prepare myself to dodge his fucking Virgil Judgment cuts! And the battle just gets better from there, with additions and changes to his base moves, usually with a fire spin, plus the occasional new move that's either done raw or after an already existing attack to throw you off. An especially cool detail I love is that Ishin isn't even creating or using fire from himself, but is rather channeling the fire created from your previous battle against you, almost like he's trying to exercise Shura. It all culminates together into a frantic battle, focusing on you playing patient and letting him fall into your traps, all while you back off to avoid the heavily damaging fire. Which gets especially nerve-wracking when considering that if you die to this boss, well, back you go to get your feelings and gourds crushed by Emma. You certainly make for an excellent last stand, Ishin, but there are still 2 more bosses left that aren't just great, but exceed expectations. These next 2 entries are so good that you all might just know what they are ahead of time, because how can I not have them at the very top? They are the pinnacle of Sekiro's combat, and the examples everyone goes to for just how perfectly they enforce the game's mastery effect. But which one takes first? Well, they are both equal to me in a lot of ways. But if I have to consider difficulty and fun above all else, then the Sword Saint himself takes second. Holy shit! This fucking fight! Way before I got this game, I kept hearing little murmurs run around the community and certain people, memes if you will, about this single boss. A boss that some proclaimed as the hardest final boss in a Soulsborne yet. One of the finest bosses they have ever made. Perhaps one of the finest of the decade. And y'all weren't kidding! Sword Saint Ishin is just that good of a battle. Stepping foot into this arena tasks you with an enormous mountain to climb. A 4-phase battle, back to back to back, with almost everything the game has taught you tested to its fullest right here. Stabs, sweeps, pokes, combos, delayed attacks, charge attacks, range attacks, aggressive AI, extremely fast mobility, all sorts of perilous moves, attacks with wide range and hitboxes, attacks that require split-second reaction times, attack chains with varying timings in between, and even lightning! All of that and more in a variety of forms you'll have to perfect and understand if you wish to even try making it through. This is, in all intents and purpose, a mark of mastery exam, where the game sees all that you've been through and the hours you've pumped in only to give you one final test to show it all off. And it is glorious! Nothing can beat the cathartic feeling of perfectly parrying the entirety of Sword Saint's spear combo, then countering with a Makiri and combo of your own. This battle is just one gigantic dopamine rush against a foe who you have known and respected for most of the game, no less at the apex of his strength as the time of the Ashana come to a close. You feel like a fucking god and are heavily rewarded for having intimate knowledge of the fight and having little hesitation in the movements you make. Every time I died, I didn't feel angry or cheated. I felt that I truly messed up and needed to do better in the next round. It is a nigh perfect boss battle and the most amazing way to end the game. So why number 2? One reason and one reason only. And it may seem like a small reason, but it is an issue that irks me nonetheless. That being the third phase and the lightning. It's easy. Way easier than the rest of the battle. If you know the timing of the lightning like the back of your hand, and especially if he uses it frequently, then you can get massive amounts of vitality and posture off of him. Now, I don't usually get in a tizzy over difficulty, but when you are a Soulsborne game, which has practically built itself on a reputation of challenging but fun and fair, and especially the Sword Saint, who has such blisteringly high expectations throughout every step, it certainly creates quite the disorientation to say the least. It ain't enough to make it bad, hell no, but it is just noticeable enough to make me slightly disappointed. Regardless, this is still one of the greatest battles I've faced in recent memory, and will likely go down in history as that. Well done, Ishin. Well done. Number 1 is Owl Father. What a fight, man. What a fight. Thought Fiends already got as good as they could get with the original fight? Well, you are in for a treat. Take everything that made the original fight so good, modify some of his already existing moves and mobility, make him quicker, give him some brand new attacks on top of it all, and you've got a boss fight that instantly goes to 11 and doesn't stop. Oh, and while we're at it, let us fulfill one of the longest enduring fantasies for so many Soulsborne players by allowing them to fight an old legendary figure at their prime. Twice, actually! And that prime statement isn't just for show, for you will have to utilize everything at your disposal, like tricks and patterns you memorized from the original fight, all the while adapting to everything new he throws at you. That's the first primary detail I like about this battle. Just like with Ishin and Sword Saint, both versions carry enough similarities to identify themselves as the same character, but also differ in regards to context. For Owl, this isn't just fighting him at his prime. This is fighting him at the last few days in his prime, the fading moments of glory that defined him, and all of this taking place within a fabricated recollection of events, created from his own personal dream of one day fighting you to the death, testing you with every last ounce of technique. Which brings me to my second point. The symbolism and storytelling in this battle is fucking brilliant. There is a reason why, when you go into this battle, that he has a moveset change aside from mechanics. It's all in that name. Owl Father. Before he was just the great shinobi, renowned for his technique and trickery, but nothing more than an old husk of the warrior he once was. To Sekiro and the player, he's just another bandit in their way, someone after the power of a dragon's heritage for their own needs. Hence why when fully executed, Sekiro states, death of a shadow. But here, the context is entirely different. Here, Sekiro fully comes to terms with the fact that Owl was behind everything and is given the opportunity to clear away any doubts he may have had beforehand. And so, he faces off against the father, the man who taught him everything, the one who raised him like his own, and the man that he not only looked up to, but respected. It is a literal manifestation of the place and trauma Owl holds in the mind of the wolf. Not only that, but going a bit meta into the overall game, if you start from the sure ending and gradually progress each new game into the next, you end up creating a sort of character arc. If he lets himself be manipulated by others, stuck to the traditions and code ingrained to him by his father, and lets go of everything, he becomes a remorseless killing machine that ends up giving birth to a demonic war god. In the next, he breaks free from his father's teachings, but still ends up serving the will of others, following his lord's wishes so specifically to the point that it just causes him more misery. It isn't until the Severance Path where Wolf finally begins to think outside the box, trying to find other ways to this inescapable problem. He doesn't just want what's best for his lord, he wants to give his friend the life he never was able to have, to live and die like a human. It again ties back into the weird method of how you find this ending. You and Wolf are literally going out of your way to find anything you can. And this process leads to its most extreme form, where through tons of waiting around and eating rice apparently, you find a way to return the divine dragon, the source of the heritage, and in turn everything that went wrong back to where it originated from, uprooting an invasive species and ensuring that this power never falls into the wrong hands and ultimately corrupts Japan. And notice how long this segment has gotten, despite me not even talking about the fight itself. As mentioned before, Owl has mostly everything he had prior, but also has several modifications and even entirely new moves added into his arsenal, one of which includes his trademark technique, the Shadow Rush, a devastating center forward that launches him upwards if it connects, soon after descending like his namesake for a kill. His posture and health resistance is also way higher in this fight, creating a tense showdown where one fuck up and his already insane but even more boosted damage and reach can plummet your bar down to half and if not death. But Lord Kulu have mercy on your soul if you reach the second phase, where Owl pulls out his greatest technique, an actual fucking spirit owl. And that pretty bird ain't just for show. Besides being able to be lit ablaze like a phoenix towards you, the main purpose of this winged devil is to make it so that almost any opening you once had can be rendered null and void via him vanishing, then leaping out and attacking from wherever the owl repositions to. With these simple additions, the fight goes from hectic to straight up nerve-wracking, as the moment you see your attack not connect, you are frantically looking around to see where the owl is, and ultimately reacting on whether to run away or to try and parry it like a damn daredevil. Which brings me to my third and final point on the father, and more specifically, why he is at number 1. Unlike Sword Saint, whose difficulty goes down in the final phase, Owl never lets up for 1 single second throughout the entire encounter. Even if you know some of the combos like the back of your hand, he can and will still surprise you with new strains, mix-ups, movement patterns, and even aggression. And unlike Sword Saint, there ain't no thunder to rely on. You gotta do it the old-fashioned way. Owl Father maintains a constant, even increasing level of difficulty throughout the fight, and it doesn't stop until you finally drive that sword through his chest. Once you do, you are greeted by overwhelming satisfaction, knowing that you've not just bested one of the greatest shinobis to have ever lived, but also one hell of a backstabbing bitch. And all of that is why Owl Father is my favorite boss in the entirety of Sekiro. The storytelling and symbolism is great, the difficulty is perfect, and the battle, above all else, provides fun and joy unlike any other boss in the game. It is a boss that quite literally swept me off my feet my first time through, and still haven't recovered from yet. I have been the Monarch of Dragons, and while I'm slightly disappointed that Devil May Cry 5 didn't get awarded as 2019's Game of the Year, I am more than happy with Sekiro getting it. Speaking of Devil May Cry...